Hello, and welcome back to This Month on the Railroad, my monthly but soon-to-be quarterly railroad news series. In today's episode, we'll be recapping August of 2023, which was quite possibly the most news-heavy month of the year. Let's jump right in. On August 2nd, the first of 64 new cars were delivered for use on the LA Metro's B and D subway lines. These new HR4000 cars, built by Chinese manufacturer CRRC, will soon begin to replace 30-year-old A650 cars built by Breda, modernizing America's 9th busiest metro. The pilot cars delivered this month were primarily built in China, only receiving final touches at CRRC's Springfield, Massachusetts plant, but the remaining cars in the order will be built here in the States. The current order calls for a total of 64 cars to be built, but the manufacturing contract stipulates that this order can be expanded to as many as 282 cars in total. Realistically though, the LA Metro won't exercise these optional orders for a while, unless CRRC can prove that they can effectively fulfill orders, which they infamously haven't been doing with the MBTA. Just under a week later, on the 8th, BNSF announced that it would be donating its unique HH20B, America's first ever hydrogen fuel cell locomotive. Built in 2009, the zero-emission switcher was quite a bit ahead of its time. While nowadays, alternative power such as batteries, and yes, hydrogen fuel cell, are considered by many railroads to be a promising technology, more than a decade ago, BNSF had already tested and decided against fuel cell. The HH20B only saw about a year's worth of testing before being placed into service, and finally, a decade later, now that hydrogen fuel cell is back on people's minds, BNSF 1205 is getting the recognition it deserves. The world's only HH20B now belongs to the Oklahoma Railway Museum, where one day it may be seen as a historically significant engine in American railroading. The next day, Norfolk Southern released yet another restored heritage unit. After spending a few months at Norfolk Southern's Juniata shops in Altoona, Pennsylvania, 1069, the Virginian heritage unit, was rolled out with a fresh coat of black and yellow paint. They also once again made an official announcement on social media that the entire fleet of 20 heritage units will be cosmetically restored over the next few years. My guess is that 1074 is up next, as it's been stored at Juniata for almost a year now. On the same day, Amtrak announced plans to potentially take over, or at least work with Texas Central, to build its 200-mile-per-hour high-speed rail route between Dallas and Houston. Despite a landmark legal win for the project last year, Texas Central has seemingly stagnated, with leaders resigning. Luckily though, with Amtrak's interest in the project, a new hope arises for this potentially revolutionary high-speed rail service. Finally, on the 9th, the Connecticut Department of Transportation approved an order for 60 new rail cars to replace the aging ex-VRE and ex-MBTA equipment on its Shoreline East and Hartford Line services. This rail car, known as the Alstom Odysseia, is a completely new design that will hit the rails in late 2026. The next day, CSX released its 5th heritage unit from the paint booth, this time celebrating the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad. Numbered 1869 to represent the year when the C&O was founded, this unit will add to CSX's rapidly expanding heritage fleet, albeit with the controversial nose fade. Keeping with the theme of CSX heritage units, on the same day, an unofficial heritage unit was spotted in Georgia, likely being created out of protest of CSX's official units. GP40-2 number 6914, an ex-Chessie locomotive, was quote-unquote vandalized with a flawless recreation of the Chessie nose and cat logo. As is usually the case with anything of this nature, the railfan community was deeply divided between whether this was an act of vandalism or a work of art. My personal take on it is that yes, legally speaking, it is an act of vandalism, but it looks great and CSX should keep it. If CSX wants to investigate who did it, they can go ahead and do that, but for everyone but the person who did this, CSX 6914 is really cool to see. On the same day, Genesee & Wyoming, a massive railroad holdings company, expressed interest in testing out Parallel Systems' autonomous container cars, which at this point don't even exist yet. If you don't know, a large tech startup known as Parallel Systems wants to design train cars that can autonomously carry single shipping containers around. Obviously, this will never see any sort of widespread use, but I guess if G&W actually goes through with testing, the Georgia Central and Heart of Georgia railroads will see these wacky trains, if you can even call them that, ripping around the countryside sometime soon, if they're approved to do that by the FRA, that is. The next day, Metro-North released its 2nd heritage unit, that being for Conrail. Based off an FL9 from when Conrail operated Metro-North, this P32 features the unique yellow nose and of course the bright Conrail blue. As a certified Conrail fanboy, I do approve. 5 days later, Wabtec announced that its Erie, Pennsylvania plant could potentially be shut down in the near future. The unionized factory workers went on strike in June, and since then, instead of working to establish an agreement with the union, Wabtec has moved much of its operations to its non-union facilities in Fort Worth, Texas and Albia, Iowa. Hopefully soon, Wabtec will realize how important its Erie plant is and work out an agreement with the union. The next day, CalTrain placed an order for a battery electric version of its new Stadler Kiss trains to test on the non-electrified line between San Jose and Gilroy. This single train set will test the viability of battery electric equipment for CalTrain, as well as being Stadler's first battery electric train for the US market. 2 days later, Norfolk Southern's first rebuilt SD70M-2 was released from the shops. This new rebuild program will convert direct current SD70M-2s to alternating current, which is preferred by the railroad thanks to its decreased maintenance costs and increased tractive effort. Dubbed the SD70 ICCs, these SD70M-2 rebuilds are essentially just SD70 ACEs, featuring isolated cabs, fresh electronics, and brand new control systems. As of right now, it's unknown how many of these engines will be built, but since NS is currently suffering from a power shortage, it's likely that a good amount of these ICCs could be coming. Speaking of a system-wide power shortage, the next day, Norfolk Southern's newly purchased AC44s were spotted. In recent months, Norfolk Southern has leased ex-BNSF SD70 MACs to help ease its power shortage, but apparently these leasers were not enough, as in June, NS purchased 36 former leaser AC44s from CTRail. By August, the first of these engines had been spotted wearing patched CEFX blue paint and even Central Maine and Quebec paint. Over the next few months or so, these AC44s will start to appear system-wide, once again thanks to Norfolk Southern's power shortage. Apparently, even after these AC44s though, NS will still be power short, so expect more leasers. The only issue is that NS really wants locomotives with alternating current traction, and the leaser pool of AC engines is pretty lackluster right now. The next day, Amtrak expanded its order for Siemens Airo train sets from 83 to 93 to meet surging demand. The first of these brand new trains will enter service in 2026, and between now and then, Amtrak will be able to order even more trains if needed. Speaking of Siemens equipment, on the 23rd, Siemens Mobility broke ground on its second American factory in Lexington, North Carolina. This new plant will open next year, allowing Siemens to keep up with surging demand for passenger equipment. A good amount of these aforementioned Airo trains will most likely be built here. The next day, the California High-Speed Rail Authority took the next step in building its initial Central Valley section by beginning the process of ordering trains. At this point, no manufacturer has officially been chosen, but a set of specifications has been laid out by the authority. As of right now, the CAHSRA wants 6 trains with a top speed of 242 miles per hour, capable of comfortably sitting at 220 miles per hour, and lasting at least 30 years in regular service. The first of these trains will arrive in 2028, with the other 4 arriving in 2030 before the Central Valley section officially opens. Once the entire San Francisco to Los Angeles line is completed, even more trains will be ordered, allowing for frequent service between the two cities. The next day, CSX released its second official heritage unit of the month, with ES44AC number 1850 wearing a Louisville and Nashville paint scheme. This makes for a grand total of 7 heritage units so far, 6 of those officially being painted by CSX. On the 28th, NJ Transit ALP46 number 4640 was spotted in a retro NJ Transit livery as seen on the E60s and ALP44s. Supposedly, this new heritage unit won't debut until either later this month or October, but here it was in late August. Finally, on the same day, ALC42s made their debut on the Palmetto, making it the 5th route to officially receive the new Charger locomotives. Once again, deliveries continue and so does testing, with 40 units being delivered to date and access testing going down on the Northeast Corridor. Anyways, that's the month of August, which was quite possibly the most news-filled month of the year. Definitely a good way to end this month on the railroad. If you haven't seen my recent announcements on the community tab, or the outro to my last episode of this month on the railroad, this series is being decreased to every 3 months and renamed to Railroad Quarterly, so I can focus on college. Until then, I'll still occasionally upload other videos, but it'll definitely be less frequently. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon in 3 months for the first episode of Railroad Quarterly.